r/AmItheAsshole FIL used me as free babysitter, so I abandoned them. Ada for exposing my FIL's babysitting scam and cutting off his entire side of the family? I'm still shaking as I write this. 20 minutes ago, I walked out of my in-laws' annual family reunion after dropping the biggest truth bomb of my life, and my phone hasn't stopped buzzing since. Let me back up to 3 hours ago when I was standing in their kitchen, watching my father-in-law Frank slip a wad of cash into his wallet while his sister thanked him for arranging everything with your wonderful daughter-in-law again. That's when the final piece clicked into place, and I realized I'd been living in the middle of an elaborate con for the past 8 months. It started innocently enough last fall. Frank would call me with these emergency situations. His nephew needed someone to watch his twins for a few hours. His sister's babysitter fell through. Could I possibly help out this one time? Being the people pleaser I am, I always said yes. What was supposed to be occasional favors turned into every single weekend. I'd show up expecting one kid and find 3. A quick afternoon would stretch into overnight stays. I missed my best friend's bachelorette party, my cousin's wedding, and countless date nights with my husband because there was always some family crisis that required my immediate attention. The guilt trips were masterful. Sarah, you're the only one we trust with the children. You're such a natural with kids, they specifically asked for you. It would mean so much to the family. How could I say no to that? I'm 28, married for 3 years, and desperately wanted to be accepted by my husband's tight-knit family. I thought being the reliable one would earn me their respect. But today, standing in that kitchen, watching Frank pocket what I now realize was payment for NY services, everything made 6 cents. The relatives weren't asking for favors, they were paying for professional childcare. Frank had been telling them I was running some kind of babysitting service and was eager for the work. Meanwhile, he told me they were desperate family members who needed help, playing on my guilt while collecting every penny they paid. I spent my weekend babysitting 4 kids under 8 while Frank played golf. I've been working as an unpaid nanny for 8 months, missing my own life, while my father-in-law profited off my labor and generosity. The worst part? Everyone thought I was being compensated this whole time. His sister even mentioned how lucky I was to have such flexible side income. My husband was at the grill outside, completely oblivious. He knew I'd been helping with babysitting, but I'd never told him how extensive it had become because I didn't want to seem like I was complaining about his family. Now I'm wondering if he was in on it too, or if he's just been incredibly naive. The betrayal is crushing. I've been driving myself crazy wondering why these people kept having emergencies every weekend, why they never seemed to have backup plans, why the kids always seemed confused when I'd show up instead of their regular babysitters. Now I know, there were no emergencies. There were no desperate relatives. There was just Frank, playing middleman and profiting off my desire to be a good family member. So when Frank's sister started gushing about how grateful she was for the arrangement, something inside me snapped. I realized this was my moment, everyone was here, the whole extended family gathered in one place. If I was going to expose this scheme, it had to be now, in front of everyone who'd been unknowingly participating in my exploitation. What happened next? Well, let's just say the reunion ended early. I took a deep breath and walked into the living room where about 15 family members were scattered around, kids playing on the floor, adults chatting with drinks in hand. The perfect audience. Hey everyone, I said, my voice carrying further than I expected. I just wanted to thank you all for something. The conversations died down. Frank looked up from his phone with mild curiosity, completely unaware of what was coming. I wanted to thank you for teaching me such a valuable lesson about family, I continued, feeling my heart pound against my ribs. Specifically, how some people can turn family relationships into a business opportunity. Frank's expression shifted slightly. His sister Janet was still smiling, probably thinking I was about to give some heartwarming speech about how much I loved being part of their family. Frank, I'm especially grateful to you, I said, turning to face him directly. For showing me how creative someone can be when they want to make money off unpaid labor. The room was getting quieter now. My husband Mark appeared in the doorway from the kitchen, beer in hand, looking confused. Sarah, what are you? Frank started, but I held up my hand. Please, let me finish. I think everyone should hear this. I pulled out my phone and opened my notes app, where I'd been tracking all the babysitting requests over the past few months. Since September, I provided childcare for this family 37 times. That's roughly 180 hours of watching kids, including overnight stays, meal preparation, and transportation to activities. Janet's smile was faltering. Mark stepped further into the room. The beautiful thing is, I never charged anyone a penny. Because Frank told me these were family emergencies. Desperate situations where relatives needed help and couldn't find childcare. I looked around the room at the confused faces. What Frank forgot to mention was that he was charging all of you for my services. Sarah, stop, Frank said sharply, standing up. You're misunderstanding. Am I? I pulled the crumpled receipts I'd managed to grab from the kitchen counter out of my pocket. Because Janet just paid you $240 for this weekend's childcare. That's $15 an hour for 16 hours of work. Very reasonable rate, actually. The room exploded into murmurs. Janet's face went white. What? Frank, you said she was doing this as a favor. You said she enjoyed it. I do enjoy kids, I said loudly, cutting through the growing noise. What I don't enjoy is being lied to and manipulated. What I don't enjoy is missing my own life events because I thought I was helping family in crisis. Mark was staring at his father with a look I'd never seen before. Dad, what is she talking about? This is ridiculous, Frank snapped, his face reddening. Sarah, you're being dramatic. I never forced you to do anything. You're right, I said. You didn't force me. You just lied to me. Repeatedly. For 8 months. I turned to address the room again. How many of you thought I was running a babysitting service? How many of you have been paying Frank for my time? Hands started going up around the room. 1, 2, 5, 7 people. The betrayal hit me fresh, seeing it visualized like that. 7 different families had been paying Frank for my services while I thought I was doing charity work. Sarah, Mark said quietly, why didn't you tell me it was this much? And that's when I realized the most devastating part of all this. I turned to look at my husband, the man I'd been married to for 3 years, and saw something in his expression that made my blood run cold. He wasn't surprised enough. You knew, I said, the words falling out of my mouth like stones. The room had gone completely silent except for one of the toddlers babbling in the corner. Mark, you knew about this. My husband's face went through a series of expressions, surprise, guilt, panic, before settling on something that looked almost like relief. Like he was tired of hiding it. Sarah, it's not what you think. Don't. The word came out so sharp that several people flinched. Don't you dare stand there and lie to my face in front of your entire family. Frank was frantically trying to take control of the situation. Everyone needs to calm down. This is getting blown way out of proportion. Sarah, you're embarrassing yourself. I laughed, actually laughed, which seemed to disturb people more than my shouting had. I'm embarrassing myself? Frank, you've been running a childcare scam using your son's wife as unpaid labor for almost a year. But sure, I'm the embarrassing one. It wasn't a scam, Mark said quietly, but his voice carried in the silence. We were going to tell you. The bottom dropped out of my stomach. We? Janet was staring at her nephew like she'd never seen him before. Mark, you knew about this? You knew we were paying your father for Sarah's babysitting? She needed the income, Frank said quickly, shooting a warning look at his son. Sarah's been struggling to find work since she left her last job, and I left my last job to go back to school, I screamed. I'm getting my master's degree. I told everyone this. I have a teaching assistantship. I don't need income from babysitting, I needed honest communication from my family. But even as I said it, pieces were clicking into place with horrible clarity. Mark's recent suggestions that I should take a break from my graduate program. His casual comments about how expensive my tuition was. The way he'd stopped asking about my thesis progress. You wanted me to quit school, I said, staring at him. This whole thing, you wanted me to become a full-time babysitter for your family. Sarah, that's not, Mark started. How much? I interrupted. How much has Frank been paying you? The silence stretched so long I thought no one would answer. Then Frank's brother Daniel, who'd been quiet in the corner this whole time, cleared his throat. I've been paying him $200 every other weekend for 3 months, Daniel said slowly. Frank said you were saving up for a down payment on a house. Said you specifically requested regular work. More voices started chiming in. Janet's $240. Cousin Mike's $150 for last weekend. Aunt Patricia's $300 for the overnight stays last month. As each number was called out, I watched Mark's face get paler. That's over $2,000 in the last month alone, I said, my voice eerily calm now. Where is it, Mark? We put it in savings. We? I whirled around to face him fully. There is no we in this situation. I didn't consent to any of this. I didn't even know about any of this. Frank stepped between us. Sarah, you need to lower your voice. You're scaring the children. Something in me snapped completely. You want to talk about scaring children? Let's talk about how I've been responsible for everyone's kids for 8 months while thinking their parents were in crisis. Let's talk about how I canceled my own life repeatedly because I thought I was helping family emergencies that didn't exist. I pulled out my phone and started scrolling through my calendar, reading out loud. October 15th, missed my grandmother's 90th birthday because Janet's babysitter fell through. November 3rd, skipped my graduate program's research symposium because Daniel had a work emergency. December 20th, spent Christmas Eve babysitting instead of attending my family's dinner because Mike's wife was suddenly hospitalized. I looked up at Mike. Was your wife actually in the hospital? He couldn't meet my eyes. She had a work Christmas party. The betrayal was so complete, so thorough, that I felt dizzy. And my husband had orchestrated all of it. Mark, I said, my voice deadly quiet now. Look me in the eyes and tell me exactly how long you've been planning this. My husband, God, could I even call him that anymore? Ran his hands through his hair, a nervous habit I used to find endearing. Now it just looked pathetic. It wasn't supposed to go this long, he said finally. Dad mentioned that Janet needed a babysitter, and I thought. You thought? I stepped closer to him, ignoring the crowd of relatives watching our marriage implode in real time. You thought you'd pimp out your wife without telling her? Don't be dramatic, Sarah. You love kids, you're great with them, and we needed the money. For what? I shrieked. For what did we need money so badly that you sold my weekends to your family like I was some kind of rental service? Mark's eyes darted to his father, then back to me. There was something else. Something worse. Mark, Frank said sharply. Don't. That's when I knew. Whatever was coming next was going to destroy me completely. Tell me, I said, my voice dropping to barely above a whisper. Right now. Tell me what you've been hiding. The room was so quiet I could hear the old grandfather clock ticking in the hallway. Even the kids had stopped playing, sensing the adult tension. I took out a loan, Mark said finally. Against the house. Last year. My legs went weak. What loan? For what? Dad's business was failing. He needed $35,000 to avoid bankruptcy, and I thought. You mortgaged our house? I couldn't breathe properly. Without telling me? Janet was staring at her brother in horror. Frank, you told me the business was doing great. You just bought that new truck. The truck was necessary for work, Frank snapped, but his face was bright red now. And the business is doing great now, thanks to Mark's help. Help? I laughed hysterically. He forged my signature on loan documents, didn't he? That's why you needed me distracted. That's why you needed me too busy babysitting to pay attention to our finances. Mark's silence was answer enough. Oh my God, I breathed. The babysitting money wasn't extra income. You've been using it to make payments on a loan I never agreed to. A loan that's secured by my house. It's our house, Mark said weakly. Not if you put it up as collateral without my consent, it's not. I turned to Frank, fury building in my chest like a wildfire. How much of this was your idea? The fake emergencies? The guilt trips? Making me think I was helping family when I was actually subsidizing your failed business? Frank straightened up, trying to regain some authority. Now see here, young lady. Don't you dare young lady me. I stepped toward him, and he actually backed up. You have stolen 8 months of my life. You made me miss irreplaceable moments with my own family. You manipulated my emotions and exploited my kindness to cover up your financial failures. Sarah, Mark pleaded, we can fix this. We can pay you back. Pay me back? I whirled around to face him. Pay me back for my grandmother's last birthday? Pay me back for the research opportunities one missed? Pay me back for the friends who stopped inviting me places because I was always helping family? Daniel stood up slowly from his chair. Frank, you told me Sarah knew about the payments. You said she was grateful for the steady work. She was grateful, Frank insisted, but his voice was getting desperate. She never complained. Because I didn't know I was working. I shouted. I thought I was doing favors for family in crisis. Cousin Mike was shaking his head in disbelief. This is insane. Frank, we've been paying you premium rates because you said Sarah was a certified childcare provider. You said she had early childhood education credentials. Another lie. Another layer of deception. What else? I asked, turning back to Mark. What other lies haven't you told me yet? But before he could answer, my phone started buzzing. Text after text. My sister, Sarah, why is Mark calling me asking about your emotional stability? What's going on? My best friend, your husband just messaged me asking if you've been acting erratic lately. Are you okay? My mother, honey, Mark is concerned about your mental health. He thinks you might need professional help. Call me. I held up my phone, showing Mark the screen. Really? You're going with the crazy wife narrative? His face went white. Sarah, I was just worried. You were setting up your defense strategy. When did you send these texts? I demanded, waving my phone at Mark. When exactly did you decide to start telling my family I was mentally unstable? Mark's mouth opened and closed like a fish. Around us, his relatives were pulling out their own phones, probably checking to see if they'd received similar messages. This morning, he admitted. After you seemed upset about the babysitting thing, I thought. The babysitting thing? My voice cracked. You thought I seemed upset about discovering my husband has been prostituting me out to his family for months? Janet was scrolling through her phone, her face growing paler by the second. Mark, you sent me a message too. You said Sarah might have a breakdown at the reunion and to not take anything she says seriously. The room erupted in murmurs again. I felt like I was watching my life disintegrate in slow motion, each revelation worse than the last. You planned this, I said, the words coming out flat and cold. You knew I'd eventually figure it out, so you preemptively told everyone I was crazy. That's not, Mark started, but Frank cut him off. Son, stop talking, Frank said sharply. Sarah, I think you should sit down. You're getting very worked up, Anne. And what? You'll call someone to have me committed? Is that the next phase of your plan? I laughed bitterly. Let me guess, if I'm declared mentally incompetent, Mark gets full control of our finances. No more pesky questions about mysterious loans or missing money. Daniel was staring at his nephew with disgust. Mark, please tell me you weren't actually planning to have your wife institutionalized over this. The pause before Mark answered told me everything I needed to know. Jesus Christ, Daniel breathed. You actually considered it. It wasn't like that, Mark said desperately. I just thought if she was struggling with stress from school and everything, maybe some counseling. Involuntary counseling? Janet interrupted, looking horrified. Mark, what kind of person are you? That's when I noticed Patricia, Frank's youngest sister, quietly recording everything on her phone. When she saw me looking, she didn't stop filming. Good, I said, pointing at her phone. Make sure you get all of this. I want evidence of every word. Frank lunged toward Patricia. Turn that off right now. This is private family business. Like hell it is, Patricia shot back, holding her phone higher. This is fraud, Frank. And conspiracy. And probably a dozen other crimes I can't even name. My phone buzzed with another text, this one from my academic advisor. Sarah, your husband contacted me asking about your recent performance and whether I'd noticed any concerning behavior changes. Is everything all right? Please call me. Oh, you absolute bastard, I whispered, staring at the screen. You contacted my school? You're trying to sabotage my graduate program? Mark was backing toward the door now, his face flushed. Sarah, you're misunderstanding everything. I was just concerned about you. The stress, the workload. The only thing stressing me out was being lied to by my husband. I followed him, my voice getting louder with each step. You made me think I was losing my mind. All those times I felt overwhelmed and exhausted, all those times I wondered why I couldn't keep up with everything, it's because I was working a full-time job I didn't know I had. Enough, Frank boomed, trying to regain control. Sarah, you're being hysterical. This has gone far enough. But before I could respond, the front door opened and my sister Emma walked in, car key still in her hand. I got your address from Mark's text, she announced to the room. He said Sarah was having some kind of mental health crisis and needed family support. She looked around at the frozen tableau, me in the center, phone clutched in my hand, Mark pressed against the wall, Frank red-faced and furious, and 15 relatives staring in shocked silence. Emma's expression shifted from concern to confusion to rage in about 3 seconds. What, she said slowly, the hell is actually going on here? I had never been so grateful to see my sister in my entire life. Emma, I said, my voice cracking with relief. Perfect timing. You're just in time to hear how my husband has been running a human trafficking operation out of our marriage. That's a serious accusation, Frank snarled, stepping toward me. You better watch what you're saying, young lady. Emma's eyes narrowed as she took in Frank's aggressive posture. My sister might be 5'3" and work as a librarian, but she'd once made a grown man cry for cutting in line at Starbucks. Did you just threaten my sister? Nobody's threatening anyone, Mark said quickly, moving away from the wall. Emma, Sarah's been under a lot of stress lately, and she's not thinking clearly. Oh, you mean the stress of being secretly pimped out to your family? Emma's voice could have cut glass. Because that's what your text messages to our entire family are describing, Mark. You're just too much of a coward to call it what it is. Patricia was still recording, now openly pointing her phone at the conversation. Frank noticed and made another grab for it, but Daniel blocked him. Let her record, Frank. I want documentation of this too. Daniel turned to Mark with disgust. I can't believe I've been participating in this. Sarah, I am so sorry. I genuinely thought you knew. Of course she knew, Frank insisted, but his voice was getting shrill. She's been doing it for months. If she had a problem with it, she would have said something. Like how she's saying something now. Emma shot back. And instead of listening, you're trying to gaslight her into thinking she's crazy? Janet was scrolling frantically through her phone. Mark, according to these texts, you've been telling people Sarah might be dangerous when she gets upset. What exactly did you think she was going to do? My blood turned to ice. Dangerous? You told people I was dangerous? Mark's face went pale. I didn't mean it like that. I just wanted people to be prepared in case you reacted strongly. Reacted strongly to what? Emma demanded, moving closer to Mark. To discovering her husband committed fraud? To finding out her in-laws have been exploiting her for months? What reaction would you consider appropriate, Mark? Before Mark could answer, my phone rang. The display showed my mother's number. Don't answer that, Mark said quickly. Please, Sarah. Let me explain things to her first. Explain what? More lies? But something in his desperation made me pause. What did you tell my mother? Emma was watching this exchange with growing alarm. Sarah, what has he been telling people about you? I answered the call and put it on speaker before Mark could stop me. Sarah, honey? My mother's voice filled the room. I just got the strangest call from your husband. He's very worried about you. He thinks you might hurt yourself. The room went dead silent. Even the kids stopped playing. He what? I whispered. Mark called me an hour ago. He said you've been having mood swings and making concerning statements about not wanting to be here anymore. Sweetheart, if you're having those kinds of thoughts, we can get you help. Mom. My voice came out steady despite the fact that my hands were shaking. I am not suicidal. I'm not having a mental health crisis. What I'm having is a completely rational response to discovering that my husband has been systematically lying to me and stealing from me for 8 months. What are you talking about? My mother's confusion was evident even through the phone. Emma grabbed my arm. Sarah, what exactly has Mark been telling people about you? Mark was backing toward the door again, but Daniel moved to block his path. I think we all need to hear this, Daniel said grimly. Mark, I said into the phone, my voice deadly calm. My mother is on speaker. Everyone in your family is listening. I want you to repeat exactly what you told her about my mental state. Sarah, please. Now. The silence stretched so long I thought he wouldn't answer. Then, barely above a whisper, I told her you'd been talking about wanting to disappear. About wishing you could just not exist anymore. Emma's face went white. You told our mother that Sarah was expressing suicidal ideation? She seemed so overwhelmed, Mark said desperately. I was worried. Bullshit, Patricia interjected, still filming. You were setting up your narrative. If Sarah figured out your scam and tried to expose it, you could just say she was having a psychological breakdown. Janet was staring at her nephew like she'd never seen him before. Mark, do you understand what you've done? Do you realize the implications of making false reports about someone's mental health? My mother's voice came through the speaker again, sharp with maternal fury. Mark, are you telling me you lied about my daughter being suicidal? Mrs. Chen, it's not that simple. Yes or no? Did you lie about Sarah's mental state to manipulate how people would react to her? The pause was answer enough. Emma, my mother said through the phone, her voice ice cold. Bring your sister home. Now. But I wasn't ready to leave yet. I had one more card to play. Actually, I said, looking around the room at all the shocked faces, I think there's something else everyone should know before I go. Mark's face went ashen. Sarah, don't. The loan Mark took out against our house? The one he forged my signature for? I looked directly at Frank. It wasn't just $35,000, was it? Frank's mouth opened and closed silently. How much? Daniel demanded, looking between his brother and nephew. I pulled out my phone and opened my banking app, the one Mark didn't know I had access to. According to our mortgage company's website, which I just checked, the amount borrowed against our house was $127,000. The explosion of voices was immediate and deafening. The number hung in the air like a bomb that hadn't finished exploding. $127,000? Janet whispered, clutching her chest. Frank, what could you possibly need that much money for? But I wasn't done. The banking app had shown me more than just a loan amount, and my hands were surprisingly steady as I scrolled through the transaction history. Oh, it gets better, I said, my voice eerily calm. Because according to this, the money didn't just go to Frank's business. Mark, do you want to tell everyone about the $45,000 that went to Vegas in March? Or should I? Mark looked like he was going to be sick. Emma grabbed my arm, her grip tight enough to bruise. Vegas? Daniel's voice was barely controlled. What the hell were you doing in Vegas with $45,000? It was an investment opportunity, Mark stammered. A sure thing. I was going to pay it all back. You gambled away our house money? I laughed, the sound sharp and bitter. While I was babysitting your family's kids for free, you were in Vegas losing money we didn't have on what, poker? Blackjack? Frank had gone completely silent, but his face was purple with rage. Not at his son, at me, for exposing everything. And the truck, I continued, riding a wave of destruction. Frank's necessary-for-work truck that cost $38,000? That was our money too, wasn't it? Patricia's phone was still recording, capturing every word. Frank noticed and this time succeeded in lunging forward, but not toward the phone, toward me. You ungrateful little. Daniel caught his brother's arm before Frank could reach me, but the intent was clear. Emma immediately stepped between us, all 5'3" of librarian fury. Did you just try to assault my sister? Emma's voice was deadly quiet. Emma, my mother's voice crackled through the phone speaker, still connected. What's happening? I heard shouting. Mark's father just attempted to physically attack Sarah, Emma announced loudly, making sure Patricia's recording picked it up. I did not attack anyone, Frank snarled, but he was still straining against Daniel's grip. That girl has been running her mouth, spreading lies about this family. Lies? I pulled up another screen on my banking app. Daniel, would you like to know how much of your babysitting payments actually went toward the loan? $0. It all went into Mark's personal account. Daniel's face went white. You kept all of it? We were building up savings, Mark started. For what? Another trip to Vegas? I scrolled through more transactions, my anger building with each revelation. $2,800 at a luxury resort in February. $1,500 at some steakhouse. $900 on what, golf lessons? Janet was backing toward the door, her face pale. I need to leave. I can't be part of this anymore. Nobody's leaving, Frank snapped, finally breaking free from Daniel's grip. We're going to sit down like adults and figure this out. Figure what out? I asked sweetly. How to split the money from selling my house when the loan defaults. Because that's where this is headed, isn't it? Mark's silence was confirmation enough. Emma was typing frantically on her own phone. Sarah, I just sent everything we've heard to Dad. He's on his way with Uncle Robert. Uncle Robert the lawyer? I asked hopefully. Uncle Robert the lawyer, she confirmed. Frank's expression shifted to something closer to panic. Now wait just a minute. There's no need to involve lawyers in a family matter. You're right, I said, standing up straighter. This isn't a family matter anymore. This is a criminal matter. Mark stepped forward desperately. Sarah, please. We can fix this. I'll get help for the gambling. We can work out a payment plan. We? I turned to face him fully. Mark, there is no we anymore. You destroyed that when you forged my signature. You buried it when you told my family I was suicidal. And you're dancing on its grave right now by still pretending this is something that can be fixed. The front door opened again, and this time it was my father and Uncle Robert, both looking grim and businesslike. Sarah, Dad said simply, crossing the room to stand beside Emma. Are you hurt? Not physically, I managed. Uncle Robert was already pulling out a legal pad and recording device. I'm going to need everyone to stay exactly where they are. Uncle Robert's presence changed the entire energy in the room. Even Frank seemed to shrink back as my uncle set his recording device on the coffee table and clicked it on. This is Robert Chin, attorney, documenting statements regarding potential fraud and financial crimes on. He glanced at his watch, Sunday, June 15th, at approximately 4:30 p.m. Now hold on, Frank blustered, puffing himself up. You can't just waltz into my house and start recording people without permission. Actually, I can, Uncle Robert replied calmly, not looking up from his legal pad. This is a one-party consent state, and Sarah has requested my assistance as her legal counsel. Patricia, I assume that's your phone recording as well? Patricia nodded, holding her device higher. Started about 20 minutes ago. Excellent. Multiple witnesses, multiple recordings. Uncle Robert looked up at Mark with the expression he usually reserved for opposing counsel. Mark, I understand you've taken out a significant loan against property that's jointly owned, without your wife's knowledge or consent. It's not that simple, Mark said weakly, but his voice was shaking now. Actually, it is exactly that simple, Uncle Robert replied. In this state, any loan secured by jointly owned marital property requires both spouses' signatures. Sarah, have you ever signed any loan documents? Never, I said firmly. I didn't even know about the loan until today. My father was taking pictures of everything, the receipts I'd scattered on the coffee table, the bank statements on my phone, even the faces of everyone in the room. His methodical documentation was somehow more terrifying than Uncle Robert's legal questions. Daniel, Uncle Robert continued, you mentioned paying for childcare services. Do you have records of those payments? Daniel was already pulling out his phone. Everything's through Venmo and Zelle. I can print statements. Frank, Uncle Robert's voice cut through the murmur of voices. As the recipient of these payments, did you report this income on your taxes? Frank's face went from purple to gray in seconds. That's not relevant too. It's extremely relevant. Unreported income is tax evasion. The IRS tends to take a very dim view of that, especially when it involves identity fraud. Uncle Robert made a note. Sarah, you mentioned Mark contacted your employer and family members with false information about your mental state? My graduate advisor, my mother, my sister, and probably others, I confirmed, then had a horrible thought. Mark, did you contact my therapist? The pause before he answered told me everything. Jesus Christ, Emma breathed. Mark, that's a HIPAA violation if you misrepresented yourself. I just called to ask if she thought you seemed stressed, Mark said desperately. I was worried about you. What exactly did you tell Dr. Martinez? I demanded. Another pause. I might have said I was concerned about some statements you'd made. Uncle Robert looked up sharply. What kind of statements? Nothing specific, Mark backpedaled quickly. Just that she seemed overwhelmed with everything. But I knew Mark's tells, and he was lying. What statements, Mark? What did you tell my therapist I said? Before Mark could answer, Janet's phone started ringing. She glanced at it and her face went pale. It's the police. What? Frank snapped. Why would the police be calling you? Because, Janet said slowly, staring at her screen, I think someone reported a domestic disturbance at this address. Everyone turned to look at Mark, who had gone completely white. You called the police on your own wife? Daniel asked incredulously. I was worried she might, Mark started, then stopped. Might what? Uncle Robert's voice was deadly quiet. Had an episode, Mark finished weakly. The room erupted again, but Uncle Robert held up his hand for silence as Janet's phone kept ringing. Answer it, he instructed. Put it on speaker. Let's all hear what Mark told them. Janet's hands were trembling as she answered the phone and hit speaker. Hello, this is Officer Martinez with the County Sheriff's Department. We received a call about a possible domestic violence situation at this address. Is everyone safe? The silence in the room was deafening. I could hear my own heartbeat in my ears as everyone stared at Mark, who looked like he wanted to disappear into the floor. Yes, we're all safe, Janet managed, her voice tight. but I think there's been some kind of misunderstanding. The caller reported that a family member was acting erratically and might pose a danger to herself or others. He seemed very concerned about his wife's behavior. Is there a Sarah present? My father stepped closer to me, his jaw clenched so tight I thought it might crack. Uncle Robert was scribbling notes furiously, and I could practically see him calculating lawsuit damages in his head. I'm Sarah, I said clearly. And I'm perfectly safe. My husband apparently called you with false information. Ma'am, your husband was very worried. He said you'd been making threats and acting unpredictably. He mentioned you might be having some kind of breakdown. The word threats hit me like a slap. What threats? Officer Martinez, what exactly did my husband tell you? I said. There was a pause on the other end. He said you'd been talking about making people pay for what they'd done to you, and that you were becoming increasingly agitated and aggressive with family members. I felt the blood drain from my face. Mark had taken my discovery of their scheme and twisted it into something sinister. Every word I'd said about feeling betrayed, about wanting them to face consequences for their lies, he'd reframed it all as threats of violence. That son of a bitch, Emma whispered, staring at Mark with pure hatred. Officer, Uncle Robert interjected smoothly, this is Robert Chen, attorney for Sarah. What we have here is a case of someone filing a false police report to cover up financial crimes. My client discovered that her husband has been committing fraud, and instead of addressing that, he's attempting to discredit her by claiming she's mentally unstable. Frank was frantically waving his hands, trying to get Mark to shut up, but it was too late. The hole was already dug. Sir, are you saying the original call was intentionally misleading? Officer Martinez asked. I'm saying my client's husband forged her signature on loan documents, stole over $100,000 from their joint assets, and when she confronted him about it, he tried to gaslight her by telling everyone she was dangerous, Uncle Robert replied calmly. We have multiple witnesses and recordings. Mark finally found his voice. That's not what happened. Officer, my wife has been under enormous stress lately, and when she gets upset, she says things. Like what? I interrupted, my voice sharp. What exactly did I say that you interpreted as a threat, Mark? You said you were going to make us all pay, Mark said desperately. You said you wanted to destroy the family. I stared at him in disbelief. I said I wanted you to face consequences for lying to me. I said this family had destroyed my trust. How is that a threat of violence? Patricia was still recording everything, and I noticed she'd moved closer to make sure she caught Mark's exact words. Smart woman. Officer Martinez, I said clearly into the phone, my husband has been systematically lying to me for months, stealing money from our joint accounts, and using me as unpaid labor in a scheme I never consented to. When I discovered this today and confronted him about it, he decided to paint me as unstable rather than admit what he'd done. Ma'am, we're going to need to send someone out to take statements, Officer Martinez replied. This sounds like it's gotten complicated. Mark's face went ashen. No, that's not necessary. This is just a family disagreement that got out of hand. But it was too late. The police were coming, Uncle Robert was documenting everything, and my marriage was imploding in real time. And somehow, I'd never felt more clear-headed in my life. The police arrived 15 minutes later, two officers who looked like they'd expected a simple domestic call and instead walked into what Uncle Robert was now calling a RICO case waiting to happen. Officer Martinez was a middle-aged woman who took one look at the room full of people, the recording devices, and Uncle Robert's legal pad and sighed deeply. Her partner, Officer Kim, immediately started separating us into different areas of the house to take individual statements. Mrs. Sarah Williams? Officer Martinez approached me with a notepad. I understand this situation has escalated significantly since the initial call. That's an understatement, I replied, glancing around at Mark, who was being questioned by Officer Kim in the kitchen. Through the doorway, I could see him gesticulating frantically, probably still trying to sell his unstable wife narrative. Frank had positioned himself near the officers like he was some kind of family spokesman, but Uncle Robert smoothly intercepted him. Frank, I'd recommend you contact your own attorney before making any statements to law enforcement. I don't need an attorney, Frank blustered. This is all a big misunderstanding. Officer Martinez raised an eyebrow. Sir, from what I'm hearing, we're potentially looking at forgery, fraud, tax evasion, and filing false police reports. You definitely need an attorney. That's when my phone rang again. This time it was Dr. Martinez, my therapist. Sarah? Her voice was concerned but professional. I received a very troubling call from someone claiming to be your husband. I need to ask you directly, are you having thoughts of harming yourself or others? The room went quiet as everyone strained to hear. I put the phone on speaker, looking directly at Mark through the kitchen doorway. Dr. Martinez, I am not suicidal. I am not homicidal. I am not having a mental health crisis, I said clearly. What I'm having is a completely appropriate response to discovering criminal behavior. What exactly did the caller tell you? He said you'd been making statements about ending it all and that you'd expressed violent fantasies about your family. Sarah, these are very serious allegations that require immediate intervention if true. Mark's face went white in the kitchen. Officer Kim was taking notes rapidly. Dr. Martinez, those allegations are completely false, I replied. The person who called you has been systematically defrauding me and is now trying to discredit me to avoid consequences. There was a pause on the other end. Sarah, impersonating a spouse to a healthcare provider is a serious violation. I'm required to report this. Please do, Uncle Robert interjected. We're documenting all criminal activity for our case. As Dr. Martinez hung up, Officer Kim emerged from the kitchen with Mark, whose face was now ashen. Ma'am, Officer Kim said to her partner, we're going to need to call for backup and possibly detectives. This is looking like a complex fraud case. That's when Janet's phone rang again. This time it was her bank. Mrs. Patterson? This is Melissa from First National's fraud department. We've flagged some unusual activity on your account related to payments to a Frank Williams. We're required to investigate potential money laundering when we see this type of payment pattern. Frank's face went purple. Money laundering? That's ridiculous. But Janet was staring at her phone in horror. How much money are we talking about? Ma'am, our records show approximately $3,200 in payments over the past 6 months to Mr. Williams, all coded as childcare services. The payments trigger our monitoring system because they're just under reporting thresholds. Uncle Robert looked up sharply. Frank, have you been deliberately keeping payments under $10,000 to avoid banking regulations? The silence that followed was deafening. Officer Martinez was writing furiously now. Sir, structuring financial transactions to avoid reporting requirements is a federal crime. And that's when I realized this wasn't just about my marriage anymore. Frank's business was about to bring down half the family. The dominoes were falling, and Mark's pathetic attempts to paint me as unstable were starting to look like the least of their problems. 2 more police cars pulled up as Officer Kim was explaining to Frank that they'd need to contact federal authorities about the banking violations. Through the front window, I could see neighbors gathering on their lawns, phones out, probably posting everything to social media. Mark's cousin David suddenly appeared in the doorway, still in his work uniform. Dad texted me there was some kind of emergency. He stopped mid-sentence, taking in the scene. Why are there cops here? Your cousin's wife has lost her mind, Frank said quickly, shooting a desperate look at Mark. She's making wild accusations. Actually, Officer Martinez interrupted, we're investigating multiple felonies. Sir, you might want to call your own lawyer. David's eyes went wide. He looked around the room, taking in Uncle Robert's legal documents, Patricia's still recording phone, and the general chaos. What kind of felonies? The kind that involve the IRS, Uncle Robert said helpfully. And possibly the FBI, depending on how deep this goes. That's when David's face went completely white. Dad, please tell me this isn't about the business. Frank's mouth opened and closed silently, but Mark jumped in. David, don't say anything. We need to present a united front here. United front? I laughed incredulously. Mark, you just tried to have me committed to cover up your crimes. There is no united front anymore. Emma grabbed my arm. Sarah, your phone's buzzing. I looked down to see my graduate advisor calling. My stomach dropped as I realized how far Mark's character assassination campaign had spread. Professor Williams? I answered, my voice tight. Sarah, I just received a very concerning voicemail from someone claiming to be your husband. He suggested you might be experiencing a psychological emergency that could affect your thesis work. Given the sensitive nature of your research with children, I need to ask directly, should I be concerned about your fitness to continue in the program? The room went dead silent. Even the police officer stopped writing to listen. Professor Williams, I said carefully, my husband has been lying to people about my mental state to cover up financial crimes he's committed. I am mentally and emotionally stable. What exactly did his voicemail say? He claimed you've been exhibiting erratic behavior around children and that you've made statements about wanting to make people disappear. Sarah, if there's any truth to this, we'd need to suspend your teaching assistantship immediately pending investigation. My hand started shaking with rage. Mark hadn't just tried to destroy my family relationships, he'd gone after my career, my future, everything I'd been working toward. Professor, those statements are completely fabricated, I said, my voice deadly calm. And I believe making false reports to an academic institution could constitute harassment and defamation. Uncle Robert nodded approvingly and made another note. I see, Professor Williams said slowly. Sarah, this is quite serious. If someone is deliberately trying to sabotage your academic standing, we need to document everything. Already on it, Uncle Robert called out. This is her attorney. We'll be filing a comprehensive lawsuit. As I hung up, I noticed David was frantically texting someone. Officer Kim moved closer to him. Sir, who are you contacting right now? David's face flushed red. Just, family. Letting them know what's happening. You're warning people, Patricia said sharply, still filming. You're telling them to hide evidence. Officer Martinez stepped forward. Sir, I need to see your phone. Now. And that's when I realized this wasn't just about Mark and Frank anymore. The whole family business was apparently built on fraud, and they were all scrambling to cover it up. The only question was how deep this rabbit hole actually went. David's phone revealed text messages to at least 12 family members with urgent warnings. Delete everything, say you paid for legitimate services, and Sarah's having a breakdown, don't believe anything she says. Officer Martinez looked up from scrolling through the messages, her expression grim. Sir, this is conspiracy to obstruct justice. Wait, what? David backed toward the wall. I was just trying to prevent family drama. By coordinating cover-ups and witness tampering, Uncle Robert observed dryly. Excellent legal strategy. That's when Officer Kim's radio crackled with an update that made everyone freeze. Unit 47, we've got reports of document shredding at 1247 Oak Street. Neighbors called in suspicious activity. Frank's business address. I knew it because I'd helped Mark mail invoices there last month, back when I thought I was being a supportive wife instead of an unwitting accomplice. That's my dad's office, David said weakly. Officer Martinez was already calling for backup. We need units at that location immediately. Possible evidence destruction in progress. Frank finally seemed to grasp the magnitude of what was happening. This is insane. We're talking about babysitting money, not some massive criminal enterprise. Actually, Patricia said, lowering her phone for the first time in an hour, I think everyone should know what Frank asked me to do last month. The room went silent. Frank's face went from red to gray in seconds. Patricia, don't, he warned. He wanted me to backdated invoices, Patricia continued, ignoring her brother. Create fake business records showing Sarah as an official employee. He said it was for tax purposes, but now I understand he was trying to legitimize everything retroactively. Officer Kim stepped forward. Ma'am, do you still have those documents? I never made them, Patricia replied. Something felt wrong about it, so I kept stalling. She looked at Frank with disgust. Now I know why my instincts were screaming. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. This is Janet. I'm at the police station voluntarily providing financial records. I'm so sorry, Sarah. I had no idea. More buzzing. Another unknown number. Sarah, this is Mike. Just found out about the fake invoices Frank showed us. We never would have paid if we knew you weren't getting the money. Our lawyer wants to talk. And another, Daniel here. At my bank getting all payment records. This is bigger than just your situation. Frank's been running this scam with other employees too. I stared at my phone as more messages flooded in. The family members who'd been paying for my services were realizing they'd been scammed too, and apparently they were all heading to authorities with documentation. How many other people were you exploiting? I asked Frank, my voice barely controlled. Frank's mouth opened and closed silently. Mark stepped forward desperately. Sarah, we can still fix this. If everyone would just calm down. Calm down? Emma's voice cut through the chaos like a blade. Mark, your wife just discovered you've been running a human trafficking operation, and your response is to tell everyone to calm down? It's not human trafficking, Mark protested, but his voice lacked conviction. What do you call it when someone profits from another person's labor without their knowledge or consent? Uncle Robert asked mildly. Because that's literally the legal definition. Officer Martinez's radio crackled again. Unit 47, we've got 3 family members at the Oak Street location with boxes of documents. They say they're Frank Williams' relatives and they want to cooperate with investigation. Frank sank into his chair, finally understanding that his entire extended family was throwing him under the bus. But I was staring at Mark, realizing there was still one question nobody had answered. Mark, I said quietly, how long were you planning to keep this going? The pause before he answered told me everything I needed to know about my marriage. Forever, he whispered. We hoped you'd just accept it eventually. And that's when I finally understood, they hadn't just stolen my past 8 months. They'd planned to steal my entire future. The word forever hung in the air like a death sentence for my marriage. I stared at Mark, this man I'd shared a bed with for 3 years, and realized I was looking at a complete stranger. Forever, I repeated slowly. You were planning to use me as unpaid labor for your family's babysitting empire, forever. Mark's face crumpled. Sarah, it wasn't supposed to feel like that. We thought once you got used to it, once you saw how much the family appreciated you. Appreciated me? My voice cracked with bitter laughter. Mark, I haven't had a weekend to myself in 8 months. I missed my grandmother's birthday, my best friend's wedding, my cousin's baby shower. I've been working every Saturday and Sunday while you played golf and gambled away our house. Officer Martinez looked up from her notes. Mr. Williams, are you confirming that this arrangement was intended to be permanent without your wife's knowledge? Before Mark could answer, Uncle Robert's phone started ringing. He glanced at the screen and his expression grew even more serious. It's the IRS fraud hotline. Apparently someone already called this in. Frank shot up from his chair. Who called the IRS? I did. The voice came from the kitchen doorway, where Janet stood with her purse clutched against her chest. About an hour ago, when I realized what was really happening. The room erupted in chaos. Frank started shouting at his sister, David was frantically trying to delete something else from his phone, and Mark looked like he was about to pass out. But what caught my attention was Patricia, who was staring at something on her own phone with growing horror. Patricia? I asked. What is it? She held up her screen so everyone could see. It was a Facebook post from Frank's business page, dated just 3 weeks ago. Williams Family Services expanding our childcare division. Now offering premium nanny services with our certified early childhood specialist. Book your reliable, professional childcare today. My photo was attached to the post. A picture Mark must have given them, showing me smiling and holding my nephew at last year's Christmas party. You advertised me, I whispered, staring at the post. You used my picture to advertise babysitting services I didn't know I was providing. The Facebook post had dozens of comments from people I'd never met, inquiring about rates and availability. Frank had been booking me out to complete strangers. Officer Kim moved closer to look at Patricia's phone. How many people responded to this advertisement? Patricia was scrolling through the comments, her face getting paler with each one. At least 20 families. And Frank responded to all of them saying Sarah was available most weekends. That's when my phone started buzzing again, this time with a call from a number I didn't recognize. Against my better judgment, I answered. Is this Sarah? An unfamiliar woman's voice. This is Linda Morrison. We paid Frank Williams $300 last weekend for you to watch our twins, but you never showed up. When we called him, he said you'd had a family emergency, but we still needed childcare and had to pay someone else. We want our money back. The room went dead silent except for the sound of my heart hammering against my ribs. Ma'am, I said carefully, I've never heard of you before. I wasn't supposed to babysit anyone last weekend. What do you mean? Frank confirmed the appointment. We paid in advance because he said you required a deposit for new clients. Officer Martinez gestured for me to keep her talking while she grabbed a second phone to record. Linda, how did you find Frank's services? I asked. Facebook. We've been using his childcare service for 2 months now. Well, we thought we were. Sarah, if you're not actually providing babysitting, where has our money been going? Before I could answer, Patricia held up her phone again. There are 17 more missed calls on the business line. The voicemail box is full. Mark was backing toward the door again, but Officer Kim stepped in his path. Sir, you need to stay where you are. My phone buzzed with a text from the woman on the call. Sarah, I'm sending you screenshots of our payment history. This is insane. The images that came through showed Venmo payments totaling over $1,200 to Frank, all labeled Sarah Babysitting with dates when I was either in class or studying at home. Frank hadn't just been selling my actual babysitting hours to family. He'd been selling my name and reputation to complete strangers, taking their money, and never telling me any of these appointments existed. Frank, Officer Martinez said grimly, this is looking like wire fraud across state lines. We're going to need federal involvement. And that's when I realized Mark's forever plan wasn't just about family babysitting. They'd been building an entire business around my stolen identity. The woman on the phone, Linda, was still talking when another call came through on Patricia's recording phone. Then another. And another. Turn off the business phone, Frank demanded, lunging toward Patricia, but Officer Kim intercepted him. Sir, that phone is evidence now. Nobody touches it. But it was too late to stop what was happening. Word was spreading on social media. I could see it in real time as Patricia refreshed the Facebook post. Comments were flooding in from angry parents demanding refunds, sharing their own stories of paying for Sarah's babysitting services that never materialized. Oh my God, Patricia whispered, scrolling through her screen. Frank, there are 37 families saying they paid you for Sarah's services over the past 6 months. 37 families. My legs went weak as I tried to process the scope of what they'd done to me. I wasn't just being used by Mark's relatives, Frank had been selling me to the entire county. Uncle Robert was calculating rapidly on his legal pad. At an average of $200 per booking, that's over $7,000 in fraudulent transactions. Per month. That's not possible, Mark said weakly, but he was staring at Patricia's phone with the same horror I felt. Officer Martinez's radio crackled again. Unit 47, we need you to know we've got a situation developing. The DA's office is sending someone over. This case just got bumped to White Collar Crime Division. Before anyone could respond, the front door burst open and my brother Jason stormed in, still in his hospital scrubs from his nursing shift. Where is he? Jason demanded, scanning the room until his eyes locked on Mark. Where's the piece of garbage who told our mother his wife was suicidal? Jason, no, Emma started, but our brother was already moving. It took both police officers and my father to restrain Jason from reaching Mark, who had pressed himself against the wall like he could disappear into it. You told Mom that Sarah was dangerous? Jason's voice was deadly quiet as the officers held him back. You made our 70-year-old mother think her daughter was going to hurt herself? I was concerned about her mental state, Mark stammered, but even he seemed to realize how pathetic that sounded now. Concerned about her mental state? Jason laughed bitterly. Were concerned she was going to expose your crime spree? That's when my phone rang again. This time it was my bank. Mrs. Chin Williams? This is First National's fraud department. We're calling because we detected unusual activity on your joint account. Someone has been depositing checks made out to you, but the endorsement signatures don't match our records. I put the phone on speaker with shaking hands. What checks? We show 17 deposits over the past 4 months, all for childcare services, totaling $3,100. The endorsement signatures appear to be forged. Mark wasn't just stealing my labor. He was literally forging my name on checks and depositing them into our joint account, money I never knew existed, from jobs I never knew I was supposed to work. Uncle Robert looked up from his notes with the expression of a lawyer who'd just hit the jackpot. Check fraud across state lines, identity theft, and conspiracy. Mark, you've managed to commit enough felonies to put yourself away for decades. But Mark wasn't looking at Uncle Robert. He was staring at his phone, which had started buzzing with call after call. Answer it, Officer Martinez instructed. Mark's hands were shaking as he hit speaker. Hello? Is this Mark Williams? An angry male voice. This is Tom Patterson, Janet's husband. I just found out what you and your father have been doing to your wife, and I want you to know that Janet and I are pressing charges. We've been documenting everything for months, thinking we were helping with legitimate business expenses. Tom, wait, Mark started. No, you wait. We've got records of every payment, every fake invoice, every lie your father told us about Sarah's business. Our accountant says this could destroy our taxes for the past 2 years. You've made us unwitting participants in fraud. The call ended, but Mark's phone immediately rang again. And again. Family member after family member, all realizing they'd been scammed, all threatening legal action. Frank was slumped in his chair now, watching his entire extended family turn against him in real time. But I was watching something else, David, frantically typing on his phone despite Officer Kim's earlier warning. David, I said loudly enough for everyone to hear. Who are you texting now? His face went red. Nobody. Just. Officer Kim snatched his phone and read the screen aloud. Text to Chicago office, burn everything. They know about Sarah. Federal case now. Chicago office. This wasn't just a local family scam. Frank's business had multiple locations. Officer Kim's words hung in the air like a bomb that had just finished exploding. Chicago office. Multiple locations. This wasn't just about my family. Frank had been running a criminal enterprise across state lines, using stolen identities to defraud families in multiple cities. Federal crime just became federal crimes, Uncle Robert said with grim satisfaction, underlining something on his legal pad. Plural. Frank finally cracked completely. It wasn't supposed to get this big, he said, his voice breaking. It started small, just a few families here and there. But the demand kept growing, and Mark said Sarah would never find out if we were careful. How many women? I asked, my voice surprisingly steady despite the rage building in my chest. How many other wives have you been exploiting? David was staring at his confiscated phone in horror, probably realizing his burn everything text had just sealed everyone's fate. Dad, you said it was just Sarah. You said it was family business only. But Frank wasn't listening to his son anymore. He was having some kind of breakdown, rambling about business expenses and overhead costs and how nobody was supposed to get hurt. Officer Martinez was coordinating with federal agents on her radio while Officer Kim photographed everything, David's phone, Uncle Robert's notes, Patricia's recording, the Facebook evidence. My family surrounded me protectively, but I didn't feel like I needed protection anymore. I felt like I was finally seeing clearly for the first time in months. Mark, I said, turning to face my husband one last time. Look at me. He raised his head reluctantly, tears streaming down his face. This is the last time I'm ever going to speak to you, I continued calmly. I want you to understand that you didn't just steal my money or my time. You tried to steal my sanity. You tried to make me believe I was losing my mind rather than admit what you'd done. That's not something I can forgive or forget. Sarah, please. I'm not finished. My voice cut through his pleading like ice. You called my therapist, my professors, my family, and the police, trying to convince them I was dangerous and unstable. You were willing to destroy my reputation, my career, my relationships with everyone I love, just to cover up your crimes. Mark's face crumpled, but I felt nothing but cold satisfaction. The marriage is over, I said simply. Not because of the money, not because of the babysitting, but because when you had a choice between protecting me and protecting yourself, you chose yourself. Every time. Uncle Robert cleared his throat. Sarah, the federal agents will be here in 20 minutes to take over the investigation. You don't need to stay for that part. I nodded and looked around the room one last time, at Frank, collapsed in his chair, at David, staring at his shoes, at Mark, crying like the pathetic excuse for a man he'd revealed himself to be. Patricia, I said, thank you for recording everything. Your courage probably saved dozens of other families from being scammed. She nodded, still clutching her phone. I'm sorry it took so long for someone to speak up. Emma took my arm gently. Ready to go home? I thought about that question for a moment. Home. The house that Mark had mortgaged without my permission, the space we'd shared while he systematically destroyed my trust. That wasn't home anymore. But my family was here, Emma and Jason and my parents, Uncle Robert with his legal expertise and protective instincts, all of them ready to help me rebuild whatever came next. Yeah, I said, walking toward the door without looking back. Let's go home. As we stepped outside, I heard Frank's voice one last time, calling after me, Sarah, this is all a big misunderstanding. I didn't turn around. Some misunderstandings cost you 8 months. Some cost you everything. And some, if you're very lucky, set you free.